Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're well. Today I'll be fitting a new fork spring and a new rear shock to my CRF 300L. Now, just before I kick things off, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who put forward suggestions of things to add or change on my CRF. As you can see, I have made a few changes already, and the suspension is the last thing at the moment I'm wanting to do. I'm hoping this setup gives me a bit more support than the stock setup. I have gone for a K-Tech 8 Newton meter fork spring. The K-Tech kit is very popular. It seems to have great reviews, and I believe that's the right one for my weight. And I have gone for a YSS MZ456 415mm rear shock. Again, the YSS kit seems to be very popular and it has great reviews. And I think we'll start off with the rear shock. So the plan of attack is to lift the bike up until there's no weight on that rear shock with this platform lift. I'll then remove some of the linkage bolts and the shock bolts, remove the shock completely. I'll then give everything a clean and a re-grease. I'll fit the new shock, put everything back together, and then we'll move on to the fork. Now I think this might need a little tap just to free it up. There she is. Not greased up though. That's probably why it was a bit stiff. We'll make sure that's greased when we go back on. Well, that one was easier. Okay, so I believe this will wiggle out the way, and then if I release the top shock mount, it should slide straight out. God, that's stiff. There's the nut, and there's also a washer on there. Don't lose that. Now don't forget that bolt holding the top of the shock in place is the only bolt holding the shock on at all. So when you pull that out, the shock could fall off the bike. Okay, so that is the stock shock removed from the bike. You can see how it compares to the one from YSS. The YSS one is much more beefy. Next, I'm going to give everything a clean. I'll then grease up all of the pivots. I'm not sure there was any grease on them to start with. And then from there, we'll slide in the new shock and we'll get everything put back together. Now these pivots have these very delicate looking roller bearings on the inside, and I don't really want to remove the center sleeve completely in case those bearings fall to pieces. So I'm going to push it part way through one way, grease one side, push it part way through the other way, grease the other side, and leave it at that. I'll then repeat the same over here, and then from there we'll get the new shock fitted. When it comes to fitting the new shock, if you drop the bike down slightly, it does create a bit more room here to slide the shock into place. I wish I'd known that earlier when removing the standard shock. And when you slide the shock in, it goes this way round with the threaded leg on the left hand side of the bike and this bolt facing the front of the bike. Make sure you have the top shock bolt ready so you can hold that shock in place when it goes on. It's a little bit fiddly from this angle. There we are. And refit the washer. And the bolt. I must say, this lift is very good. It's very cheap as well. I will leave a link to it down below if you're interested. Okay, moving on to the fork. Now there's only one fork spring in the fork of a CRF 300L, and it's located in the right hand leg. So the first thing I need to do is loosen off this top cap here. I'll then remove the front wheel and the right fork leg completely. I'll then swap the standard spring for the K-Tech one. I'll then get everything back onto the bike. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a socket or ring spanner big enough for the top cap, so I'm going to have to use an adjustable, which normally I'd be completely against, but I don't really have another option at the moment. I'll just have to be really careful not to round things off. Just need to loosen this off slightly. That should do. Now don't forget, as you unloosen the last bolt, the fork will become loose and it could just fall straight out. So just make sure you're ready for that. Okay, next I need to completely remove the top cap from the stanchion. And then from there, you won't be able to pull it out, but if you compress the fork, it will expose the spring and the internals. So from here, you need to remove the circlip, and then from there, we can pull out the old spring, put the new one in, and put everything back together again. Okay, now this took quite a while to do. I was trying to figure out the easiest way to do it, but if you take a blunt object and push onto this center spring here, it will then give you a bit of room to take the circlip out. This top section here then just pulls out of the fork, and then from there you can get to the spring. Now I'm going to pull the spring out, but only a little bit at a time to allow it to drain off, as it does have oil on. And then from there we'll get the K-Tech spring in. Okay, so there is the standard spring in comparison to the K-Tech one. I've given everything a really good clean. Normally, I would change the fork oil here, but as the fork is near enough brand new, I just don't see the point, as the oil is still very, very clean. So the next thing to do is to fit that K-Tech spring, get everything put back together, and then get the fork leg back on the bike. Now that was a bit fiddly, but if you push down on the top cap and then push down on the top of here, it does create a little bit of space to get the circlip in. From here, if you slide the stanchion up to the top cap and then screw the top cap into place, just go till it stops, it doesn't need to be tight, and then we'll get the fork back on the bike. Okay, so that's the new rear shock and the new fork spring fitted to the bike. They were actually both much easier to fit than I thought they were going to be. The whole bike is now sitting around 2 centimeters higher, both at the front and the back of the bike, which is also giving me a bit more ground clearance as well. I have just been down the road on the bike, and it is definitely more supportive than the stock setup. However, I haven't ridden with it off-road yet, so I don't want to say too much. So I will finish the video there. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you soon.